Welcome to today's epic HFY Sci-Fi tale. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more of the best human vs. galaxy stories every week. The beast's roar shook the chamber, reverberating off stone walls carved from the bedrock of an alien world. Rows of cadets flinched, reptilian crests flattening, insectoid limbs curling protectively, tusks chattering in instinctive dread. The sound was meant to crush defiance, to remind them all that nature itself bowed before predators of such scale. Every student in the room froze, every student but one. The lone human sat with arms folded, posture slouched, gaze unfocused as if the beast were little more than background noise. When the roar subsided into a low growl, he stretched, yawned, and muttered in a tone of mild annoyance, "Back home we call that a kitten." A hush fell. No one laughed. Even the beast seemed momentarily silenced, its fangs dripping with saliva, yellow eyes fixed on the fragile figure who dared dismiss it so casually. Then a ripple of disbelief rolled through the class, followed by hissing laughter and incredulous snarls. Marcus Hale did not flinch under their mockery. He sat upright, adjusted his plain academy-issued tunic, and met the beast's glare with steady gray eyes. His features were ordinary by human standards, lean, not muscular, broad-shouldered but not towering. Yet in the Academy of Dominion, where warlike species trained their finest youth, Marcus looked fragile. To the cadets of Zarkol's kind, scaled, taloned, and born for violence, the human was a curiosity that had overstayed its welcome. Zarkol himself, seated 2 rows away, let out a guttural laugh, his chest scales rippling. "Your species must be pathetic indeed if that is your kitten. Perhaps your females cradle serpents as toys and your children wrestle with claws." His tone was sharp with derision, but beneath it lay a trace of irritation, for Marcus's calm unsettled him. The instructor, Vargon, raised a clawed hand for silence. His hide bore scars from campaigns older than any student's life, his voice carrying the weight of earned command. "Discipline," he barked, though his amber eyes lingered on Marcus with something other than contempt. Curiosity, perhaps. The beast shifted behind its containment field, its breath steaming against the barriers. The cadets whispered nervously among themselves. The test was simple: confront fear, stand one's ground, and prove worthiness. It was a ritual older than the academy, one that separated true warriors from prey. Each cadet would face the beast alone. They were expected to tremble, to sweat, to kneel if they must, but never to run. That was the measure of courage. Marcus rose when his name was called, unhurried, almost bored. His boots echoed against the floor as he approached the barrier. Vargon studied him closely, noting no tremor in the human's hands, no quickness in his step. Most beings betrayed their fear through scent, through quivering limbs, through unfocused eyes. The human displayed none of it. He stood there, inches from a predator twice the size of a transport, and tilted his head as if appraising a puzzle. "You should be quaking," Zarkol muttered under his breath, yet Marcus caught the words. Instead of replying, he leaned against the railing and let the beast roar again, its jaws opening wide enough to swallow him whole. He yawned once more, scratching absently at his jawline. The gesture was not arrogance, it was dismissal. To every cadet watching, it was blasphemy against the primal order of predator and prey. Vargon felt a stir of unease. He had seen warriors mask fear with bravado, with trembling rage, with forced laughter. But Marcus displayed none of these masks. His composure was not a disguise. It was genuine. The instructor ended the trial with a sharp gesture, signaling the beast's handlers to retract it into the holding cells. The cadets exhaled relief, shoulders slackening, chittering nervously. Marcus returned to his seat without a word. Whispers erupted. Some mocked him, calling him suicidal. Others muttered darker things, calling him unnatural. Zarkol glared, claws flexing, scales bristling with suppressed fury. His pride demanded the human be broken, if only to restore order. Yet Marcus simply leaned back again, closing his eyes as if he had been mildly inconvenienced rather than tested. Later, when the class dispersed, Vargon lingered. He stood at the edge of the empty chamber, staring at the space where Marcus had stood. The memory of that unshaken gaze clung to him. There was no bravado, no trembling mask. Just calm, like the surface of water concealing unimaginable depths. He wondered, not for the first time, what sort of world could shape such a man, and why, despite himself, he felt a twinge of fear. The next morning began with the clang of training bells, their metallic resonance echoing through the vast halls of the academy. Rows of cadets assembled in the arena, weapons slung across their backs, hides and scales glistening under the cold artificial sun lamps. The air reeked of anticipation, tinged with the musk of alien sweat and the ozone bite of energy shields. This was not a day for fear tests. This was the day of the first physical trials. Marcus Hale stood among them, his posture loose, almost lazy, as if the rigid formations and blaring horns failed to touch him. His plain frame looked unimpressive beside the hulking bulk of Zarkol, whose scales shimmered like obsidian armor, or beside the insectoid brothers with their bladed forelimbs polished for combat. Every cadet present had been bred, trained, or engineered for war. Marcus, by comparison, looked like he had wandered in by mistake. Instructor Vargon's voice cut through the assembly. Endurance run. 5 laps of the gauntlet. Strength, stamina, refusal to yield, that is the measure today. Begin. The signal flared. Zarkol surged forward like a battering ram, talons digging into the stone as he vaulted the first barrier. Others followed, wings buzzing, claws tearing, muscles straining. Marcus jogged at a steady pace, weaving among them without hurry. His breath was even, his eyes forward. The gauntlet was cruel by design. Towering walls slicked with slime, pits of shifting gravel that sucked at feet, and mechanical arms that swung heavy weights at passing cadets. The stronger cadets barreled through with brute force, snarling triumphantly as obstacles shattered. But Marcus adapted differently. He slid under swinging arms instead of taking them head-on, used momentum to roll across gravel pits, and scaled walls with surprising efficiency despite his lack of claws. By the 3rd lap, Zarkol had pulled ahead, his scales slick with effort but his pride unshaken. Behind him the others fought to keep pace, panting and stumbling. Marcus meanwhile had not broken rhythm. His jog remained the same, his breath measured, his movements economical. By the 5th lap the outcome was undeniable. Zarkol crossed first, roaring his triumph. But as the others collapsed gasping, Marcus came in second, sweat dampening his tunic yet his posture unbowed. He had not sprinted, had not clawed, had not forced his way through. He had endured. Whispers spread quickly across the arena. To finish behind Zarkol was no shame. To finish ahead of species engineered for combat was unthinkable. Marcus offered no victory gesture, no boast. He simply took his place at the sidelines and stretched, as if his body had been waiting for real exercise. Zarkol's glare burned hotter than any lamp. He had expected the human to collapse before the 2nd lap. Instead, Marcus's quiet persistence had placed him nearly on equal footing, and that was intolerable. The next trial came swiftly. Weapons training. Pairs were matched, energy staves issued, the task simple: strike, defend, survive. Zarkol crushed his opponent in moments, his strength overwhelming. The insectoid cadets skewered the air with precision, their limbs a blur of polished blades. Marcus faced a tusked giant twice his mass. At the first clash, the giant's blow hurled Marcus across the floor. Gasps erupted as he slammed against the arena wall. But instead of staying down, Marcus rolled to his feet, grin lopsided, staff raised again. Another blow came, heavier, brutal. Marcus staggered, caught his balance, and returned with a feint that cracked across the giant's ribs. It was not enough to topple him, but it landed. The duel dragged on. Every strike Marcus took seemed enough to end it, yet he rose again. Bruised, bleeding at the lip, knuckles raw, he pressed forward with dogged persistence. He did not dominate with skill or overwhelm with strength, but with sheer refusal to stop. When at last the tusked cadet faltered, dropping his staff in exhaustion, Marcus was the one still standing. The arena was silent. Even Zarkol's scorn froze on his tongue. Instructor Vargon's eyes narrowed. He recognized that resilience. He had seen it in the veterans who crawled out of burning wreckage, who fought with broken limbs, who refused to die when logic said they should. Yet here it was again, distilled into the frame of an unimposing human. The day ended with the mental challenge, a labyrinth of shifting holograms and deceptive pathways meant to unravel the mind. Many cadets blundered, lost in illusions, relying too much on instinct or brute memory. Marcus walked through calmly, testing each path, studying patterns, marking tiny anomalies in the projection that betrayed truth from deception. He emerged from the maze second only to Vargon's own species, his calm face unlined by strain. When the class was dismissed, whispers followed him like shadows. Some cadets muttered admiration, others spat jealousy. Zarkol clenched his claws until blood seeped between scales. His pride could not withstand this quiet human who should have failed at every step yet had not. Vargon lingered long after the cadets dispersed, staring again at the human's departing figure. Marcus had shown no hunger for dominance, no joy in victory, no pride in his endurance. It was as though the trials were beneath him, distractions rather than challenges. And that, Vargon thought grimly, was far more unsettling than arrogance. For the first time, the instructor considered that perhaps the galaxy had misjudged humanity. Not weak. Not prey. Something else entirely. The Academy's training grounds were alive with the hum of tension. Word of the human's stubborn endurance had spread beyond the classroom, whispered between mess hall tables and murmured across sparring pits. To some, Marcus Hale was a curiosity, a puzzle that defied their instincts. To others he was an insult to the order of things. No one felt that insult more keenly than Zarkul. The reptilian warrior had built his identity on dominance. His kind were bred to be champions, their worth measured in scars and victories. Yet the human's quiet resilience had eroded his certainty. A creature so frail should have broken, should have yielded, but Marcus had not. The affront festered until Zarkul could not bear it. It happened in the late hours, when the sky above the academy glowed faintly with the shimmer of distant suns. The cadets gathered in the central ring for unstructured sparring. Challenges were common, wagers louder still, but rarely did the arena fall into the hush that greeted Zarkul's roar of challenge. "Human," he bellowed, claws scraping the stone floor as sparks burst beneath his weight. "Stand before me. If you are more than frail flesh and idle words, prove it." Marcus rose from where he had been sitting, boots crossed, posture as unhurried as if he had been called to dinner. His expression did not change, though the weight of every eye pressed down upon him. He stepped into the ring with his usual steady gait. "I don't need to prove anything to you," he said, voice level, words carrying even in the silence. Zarkul's jaws spread in a grim smile. "Then your silence is admission. You hide behind luck, behind tricks. Face me or crawl back to whatever pit spawned you." Marcus sighed, rolling his shoulders as though loosening muscles stiff from idleness. "Fine. But you won't like the answer." The circle closed. Vargon stood at the edge, arms folded, his gaze sharp. He had not sanctioned this duel, yet he allowed it. Sometimes truth emerged only when pride collided with defiance. The first strike came like thunder. Zarkul lunged, claws sweeping wide, strength enough to tear stone. Marcus moved aside at the last instant, boots skidding across grit. He did not counter immediately. He waited, watched, forcing Zarkul to spend his rage in heavy blows that cracked the ground where Marcus had stood seconds before. The cadets roared their approval, expecting the human to be crushed quickly. But the minutes stretched, and still Marcus avoided the killing strikes. His movements were not graceful in the alien sense, not the flowing arcs of insectoid blades, nor the crushing leaps of tusked giants. He fought with economy, with patience, slipping between strikes, using feints, tripping when opportunity arose. He fought like someone who had learned through necessity, not ritual. Zarkul grew angrier with each miss. His roars shook the arena, his tail smashing divots into the stone, yet Marcus's calm only deepened. A grin tugged at his bruised mouth when he ducked beneath a claw that should have shredded him. Then Marcus struck. Not with strength, he had none to rival Zarkul, but with timing. A kick to the knee forced the reptilian to stagger. A jab to the throat drove breath from scaled lungs. A sweep of the boot tripped the warrior into the dirt. Gasps rippled across the circle as the impossible happened. Zarkul, the strongest of the class, on the ground with the human standing over him. Marcus did not raise his fists in triumph. He simply stepped back, chest heaving with effort but gaze steady. "That's the thing about fighting humans," he said quietly, though every cadet heard it. "We don't stop just because we're losing." Zarkul struggled to his feet, eyes blazing with humiliation. He wanted blood, but the duel was over. To continue would have been disgrace. The silence in the ring pressed harder than any blow. Vargon broke it. His voice was low, almost reverent. "Enough." His gaze lingered on Marcus, and in it was something darker than respect, something bordering on fear. The cadets dispersed slowly, murmurs following Marcus like shadows. Some looked at him with awe, others with suspicion, but none could dismiss him anymore. The human had crossed a threshold. He was no longer merely an oddity. He was a threat to their order. That night, Vargon stood alone at the observation deck, watching the starlight glimmer across the void. His claws tapped against the railing as his mind churned. He had fought beasts that could swallow armies, enemies who wielded weapons that split worlds. Yet those foes had always revealed their nature quickly: ferocity, cunning, cruelty. With the human it was different. Marcus's strength was not in claws or muscle. It was in his refusal to yield, in the unsettling calm that cloaked him even when death loomed. The Academy's final trial loomed ahead, a test against the legendary apex beast, a creature drawn from the most violent corners of the galaxy. It was designed to humble even the proudest cadet, to remind them of nature's supremacy. As Vargon stared into the void, he wondered what would happen when that beast stood before Marcus Hale. The question gnawed at him, filling him with an unease he had not felt in decades. For if the human treated monsters as kittens, what would he make of the galaxy's most terrible predator? And what would that reveal to the rest of them about the species called man? The chamber prepared for the final trial was unlike the others. The walls were reinforced with alloys that gleamed under the cold light, etched with scars from past battles. The cadets stood in silence, their usual chatter stilled by the weight of what they were about to witness. At the center, a gate loomed, massive enough to admit a creature large enough to crush an armored carrier. Behind it, muffled rumbles shook the floor, low and steady, each one vibrating through bone and sinew. Instructor Vargon addressed them, his voice grim. The apex beast. You will not slay it. You will not outmatch it. You will confront it and you will endure. This is the measure of your courage. His eyes lingered on Marcus Hale, a trace of something unreadable within them. Perhaps doubt, perhaps curiosity, perhaps fear. The gate shuddered open. A roar exploded from the darkness, deeper and more terrible than any sound that had filled the academy before. The beast emerged, scales ridged with jagged bone, claws like scythes, eyes burning with primal fury. Its presence was suffocating, a force of nature embodied in muscle and malice. Cadets recoiled, even Zarkul, whose pride had not yet healed from his defeat. Marcus stepped forward when his name was called. He did not rush, nor did he hesitate. His boots carried him with the same steady rhythm he had shown in every trial. The beast's roar rolled across the chamber, rattling the metal, sending a tremor through the assembled cadets. Marcus yawned, stretching his shoulders as though weary of the noise. Back home, he murmured, voice cutting through the tension like a blade, we call that a kitten. The words landed with the weight of a weapon. Gasps rippled through the cadets. Zarkul's jaw clenched, unable to reconcile arrogance with serenity. Vargon's claws tightened against his arms. The beast lowered its head, steam curling from its nostrils, and charged. Marcus did not meet brute force with brute force. He moved aside at the last instant, rolling across the ground, rising with a calmness that belied the speed of the attack. He circled, eyes studying, noting the rhythm of its breath, the shift of its weight. Each time the monster lunged, he yielded, forcing it to expend energy against air and stone. Where others would have panicked, he seemed almost amused, muttering under his breath as though the beast were no more than an unruly animal. The cadets shouted warnings, their fear climbing with each strike that nearly ended him. Marcus ignored them. He kept moving, kept enduring, waiting. At last, when the beast's movements slowed, when its rage began to dull with exhaustion, he struck. Not with power, but with precision, thrusting a shard of stone into the soft tissue of its flank, jabbing a boot against its injured leg, forcing it to stumble. The beast bellowed in pain, shaking the chamber. Blood streaked Marcus's cheek, his tunic torn, breath ragged. But he grinned, teeth flashing red. Come on then, he whispered, daring it forward. The cadets watched in stunned silence. To face such a monster was one thing. To smile into its maw was something else entirely. The beast reared, claws slashing down, but Marcus darted in close, too close for its bulk to maneuver. He hammered his fists into vulnerable flesh, every strike small yet relentless. The creature staggered, confusion replacing fury, until at last it collapsed with a groan that shook the floor. It lay breathing heavily, eyes flickering with something foreign, submission. Marcus stood over it, chest heaving, hands trembling from exertion, yet his expression was calm. He reached out, resting one hand on the beast's heaving side. The cadets stared, unable to comprehend what they saw. A predator bowing to prey, a monster broken not by claws but by will. Vargon stepped forward, his voice thick with awe. The beast yields. The trial is complete. His gaze swept across the room, then settled on Marcus. What are you? Marcus wiped the blood from his mouth, eyes meeting the instructor's without hesitation. A man. That's all. Zarkul stared at him, pride shattered, his voice raw. What kind of world breeds men like you? Marcus allowed himself a faint smile, the weariness of the fight settling into his bones. Home, he said simply, and nothing more. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar. Every cadet felt it, the knowledge that the galaxy had been wrong. Humanity was not fragile, not prey, not weak. Humanity was the predator that endured when others broke, the force that laughed in the face of terror. Vargon's voice finally broke the silence, low and almost reverent. The most dangerous creature in this galaxy is not the beast before you. It is the man who calls it a kitten. Marcus turned and walked from the arena, leaving the cadets behind in their stunned quiet. They had seen strength, but more than that, they had glimpsed something far more unsettling. The calm, unshakable resilience of a species that refused to break. And though the beast would recover, and though pride might heal, none of them would ever look at humanity the same way again. Enjoyed the story? Hit like, share, and subscribe for more epic HFY sci-fi.